But I remember sitting in front of the LBC microphone and saying, look, let's actually talk about the real issue here. The real issue is the background to these men. And I said, it's not because they're Muslim, but it seems to be, to me, a cultural issue that these men believe that white girls have less worth than Muslim girls. Now, then people come back and say, oh, yes, but there have been Muslim girls that have been raped as well. Well, a tiny proportion of them, as I understand it. It's not a redeeming doesn't really quality. Help the argument. Yeah. So I'm not somebody who's trying to give people excuses or trying to excuse their behaviour at all. I've called it out myself, and it was quite uncomfortable in some ways at the time with some of the reaction. But you have to call it how you see it. And I understand why you are saying what you're saying. I say it in a slightly different way. And I try and do it in a way, if I have got critical things to say, I'll say them in a way that I hope doesn't sort of foment any kind of ill feeling towards the wider community. He doesn't think like that.
What I like about you is that you do understand why I say the things I say, as I understand why you say the things you say. And too often, I do think presenters on TV shows, radio, podcasts, have a total unwillingness to listen to or even think about why another person might say the things they do.
Yeah.
They assume they're evil, and it's just we're not. And also there seems we've forgotten what empathy is, because I feel like people think empathy is feeling sorry for people who happen to share your view and are on your side, whereas empathy, I think, is understanding somebody else's argument and why they would think these things.
Well, it's worse than that, because we've got to a point where not only do we think that some people shouldn't have a right to express a particular view, they shouldn't even be holding that view. Well, who are we to judge that?
Yeah.
And that is the fault, I think, largely of social media. And it's come here from America, where everybody is in their own little echo chambers and silos, and then just not willing to... I mean, Brexit was probably the best example of this, where I kept getting people saying to me, but I don't understand, you're an intelligent person, how can you support Brexit? And I had a guy on the radio last night saying more or less the same thing. Well, you were misled. I said, don't patronise me. I knew exactly why I voted for Brexit. And probably everybody had slightly different reasons for doing it. I said, for me, it was nothing to do with immigration, as I've made quite clear. Freedom of movement didn't particularly bother me at all. There were lots of other reasons. But the fact that people seem to think that anybody who's got half a brain should then have voted Remain tells me all I need to know, because they're not interested. I mean, my colleague James O'Brien, again, yesterday, I thought, well, I better listen to what he's got to say so I can counter it later on. And honestly, I lasted about half a minute, because it was the same old stuff over and over again. And this idea that you should freely patronise people who voted in a particular way, they haven't learned from this. And that's why in the end they will always be defeated, because the Remain campaign was a great example of how to piss off your potential voters. And all it was Project Fear. There was no positive thing about, well, this is where we think the European Union could go and this is why Britain should be part of it because we don't want to miss out. It was all, you'll lose your job. Well, I mean, unemployment didn't go up to 5 million as George Osborne predicted. In fact, it went down. It's only now that it's starting to go up a bit for maybe different reasons. And I think if you take that attitude that you are somehow a more superior being, and you're not even willing to entertain the reasons that people voted for Brexit, then you don't win an argument that way.
Well, you end up writing a book called How to Be Right.
Or How Not to Be Wrong, indeed.
Yeah, well, that was James O'Brien's book, wasn't it?
It was, both of them. Yeah.
Oh, there are 2 books?
Yeah.
He wrote 2 books?
He wrote 2 books, How to Be Right and How Not to Be Wrong.
Oh, don't. I'm not having that.
You've only got one of them.
I read it every night before bed.
I mean, James is a really, really intelligent guy, and he's very articulate, and he doesn't have pull in the numbers. But I just think sometimes you have to try and make an effort to understand somebody else's point of view.
That's empathy. Right?
It is empathy. And if we did a role reversal now and we had to debate each other with me arguing for Remain and you arguing for Brexit, we would be able to do that because we understand each other's positions.
It's a great exercise to do.
It is.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I mean, I was at a point in my life where I was living in Europe and mainland Europe, and I felt, there's so many reasons for both sides. How can there not be?
91% watching Heretics clips are not subscribed. Quick favour, hit subscribe. Free, takes 2 seconds, and helps us question everything together.